Right. I think we can kick things off. I know we're recording, and we might have a few more people joining, but yes, welcome everyone today on this wonderful Wednesday to a session about CPQ to RCA migrations. Um, we have a solid agenda to get through today, but I want to leave time for questions at the end. We'll just dive right into some intros, talk about some background. I'll go through the agenda. Go into some background of RCA, how what our approach is, and when I say our, I mean many SIs out there, but Thunder's in particular, as well as with the tooling that Prodly brings to the table. I have with us here Max Rudman from Prodly. Then we'll go into some more of the details of what it takes to migrate from CPQ to RCA, and then talk about some of the approaches we can take in order to get you there. And at each section, as we begin here, at each section, I want this to be conversational in the sense that feel free to drop any questions into the Zoom Q&A or the chat window, and we'll make sure we get those queued up and answered. As I said, we'll have additional time at the end for any questions that come up. All right, Lindsay, we can dive in here. So my name is Alex Lorenc, been in the ecosystem for almost 9 years now, and most of that focused on Revenue Cloud from when right around the time that Salesforce acquired SteelBrick up until now. Been involved in every aspect of Salesforce CPQ, billing, related bits and pieces in clouds like Manufacturing Cloud, Calm, or at least what used to be called Calm, and now Revenue Cloud, RCA and RCB, and have led practices at a couple of prior SIs, and now have been at Thunder for a year as well. And we have with us also presenting Max. Oh, you're on mute, Max.
Oops, thank you. Thank you. Hey everyone, delighted to be here. Just real quick about me. So Max Rudman, I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for, almost 20 years now. And prior to Prodly, I founded a company called SteelBrick, which built the SteelBrick CPQ product, which of course was acquired by Salesforce in 2016. It is now Salesforce CPQ. So I know a little bit about the space and certainly one end of the migration that we're going to talk about today. Now I'm building Prodly. Prodly is a DevOps or RevOps tool, as I like to say, joke with my second company. I'm solving the problem I created with my first. So but thanks for having me. Delighted to be here, and looking forward to having the discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. And then just a little bit about Thunder, in case anyone isn't aware of Thunder. So we've been in, we were founded in 2020, but their average experience is 13 years. And, at this third or fourth generation of Salesforce SIs, since Salesforce has been around, we have a lot of experience that we bring to the table. The average tenure and background experience of most of our team, and even as we rapidly grow, we continue to hire, is pretty deep, especially in, and don't have any details here about that, in Revenue Cloud. It's been a focus area of Thunder's since Thunder was founded, basically. You can see all the stats here, but we have been invested in 3 times by Salesforce Ventures, and are pretty proud of that, and pretty proud of what we've delivered for our customers so far. And next slide, Max, about Prodly.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, Prodly is a DevOps or RevOps tool, or change management, our application lifecycle management tool. And what's unique about us is we're really focused on these declaratively configured, configuration data-driven applications built on Salesforce platform like CPQ, like Revenue Cloud Advanced, and a bunch of others. And our mission is really to make business software more broadly, and Salesforce specifically, faster and easier to implement and maintain. And we believe the way to do that is by fostering a closer collaboration between the business, the RevOps, and IT, and really enabling business users and to make more of make more of the changes themselves. And that's really the way to accelerate the change delivery cycle, which is really what it's all about, making and getting changes to production faster.
Thank you. All right, so let's talk about RCA and what it really means. We can move on to the next slide. So Revenue Cloud Advanced, RCA is the new on-core, or basically fully on platform lead to cash solution, we could say, on for Salesforce. It's been out for a while now, but is rapidly getting updates and more new functionality all the time. It's meant to be scalable, I think, is the key thing here. Unlike some of the other managed packages like the Steelbrick, like CPQ has been, which just by the nature of a managed package does have some limitations that are hard to get around. Being built on core platform does allow a lot more flexibility and for the whole lead to cash cycle. And there's extended functionality compared to what CPQ was able to offer out of the box. And one of the key areas is being built for multi-channel and built in a headless manner right from the get-go. So it's API first and can be utilized no matter what channel you're selling with, and no matter where the data is going to be coming from. We can accommodate it in Revenue Cloud and make sure that it's giving you good data and helping you generate your quotes and having time to value a whole lot faster. And if we go to the next slide, just looking at some of the differences here. So CPQ is no longer being sold net new. Technically, it's reached an end of sale per Salesforce, and that's one of the key things here to keep in mind. Our RCA is the future. CPQ, of course, is still going to be supported as a steady state managed package, and there's many thousands of clients of all sorts still utilizing CPQ, and will be into the future. But we know that RCA is the future. We know that Salesforce is putting a whole lot of effort into it, and with more and more functionality coming that surpasses CPQ and will continue to surpass and add more to it over time. And so it is the perfect time to be thinking about migrating. It doesn't necessarily need to be a pressing thing, but if you want to fully take advantage of what the Salesforce platform has to offer, especially with bits and pieces and other platform functionality like Agentforce, RCA is going to make it easier to utilize Agentforce alongside a quoting engine. We talked about some of the differences between CPQ and RCA. RCA is the future here, and so it is definitely time to be thinking about, especially if you have been using CPQ for a while and now are, you have changes planned to your business, you have changes, or your selling model. Maybe you're moving to a SaaS model. Maybe you want to get into different channel sales. In addition to other business as usual improvements that you want to be making to your selling engine on Salesforce, well, then it's a great time to think about maybe making the move to RCA. And so what does that all mean? Salesforce, I don't know if anyone in the audience attended Dreamforce, but in some of the sessions related to Revenue Cloud, Salesforce does specifically recommend, seeking out a partner who can help with that migration. And Max is going to be presenting and talking about some of the automation and acceleration that can be done with Prodly. And it is a best-in-class way to support a migration. But inevitably, there's going to be some analysis that needs to be done. We're going to want to look at your current state. We're going to want to examine what your future state goals are, and there's going to be it's this sort of migration, this sort of step is always a good time to optimize. Since you're changing your technical solution, it's a good time to optimize process as well. And so we want to make sure we have that full understanding and plan out what the migration is going to look like. And then there's some areas which we'll get into shortly that just simply can't be automated, or at least automated fully. And so that's again where a partner comes into play in order to help with any redesign that needs to occur when moving to a new quoting solution like RCA. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Thunder's approach in particular, but this also applies just generally in terms of best practices for any sort of migration project or even CPQ or Revenue Cloud project in general. So analyzing current state, like I mentioned, it may seem obvious, but it is important because I know sometimes there's a desire or tendency to want to only think about this is what we want to do in the future, forget about what we have now. But we need to look at what we have now because that's going to impact how we implement in your org. Assuming you've been using a Salesforce org for a while, it can help make a determination depending on the complexity if going to a net new org is necessary. I'd say that's an exceptional circumstance for most of our clients, but it's a possibility. We need to understand what's there. And not just around CPQ, but your entire sales process and any technical debt, customizations, et cetera, that might be in place. And then, of course, dig into all the areas that are important to any quoting tool, CPQ or RCA, your product catalog and its structure, the relationships between products, any pricing and discounting and any other logic you have around pricing. Any approvals and validations, of course, your document generation and contracting, especially if you're using other tools currently. I mean, there's many common and popular third-party tools, not just the out-of-the-box document generation, and as well as for contract management with CPQ. And so we want to understand what that landscape is and learn about your pain points with each of these steps and stages. See what's working, what isn't, what have you been potentially thinking about changing, but just haven't had the opportunity to yet. Order management as well. There's a bit of order management functionality with Steelbrick CPQ, but there's a whole lot more possible with RCA. And so we'd want to examine that in order to see is there going to be a good fit for the order management module and functionality, expanded module and functionality for RCA. And then contract and subscription management, something that CPQ does really well, but again, RCA brings another level of functionality there that is more future focused and gives more flexible handling of subscriptions and assets. And so we want to understand that portion of it too. Then with that foundation, we would definitely dig in and want to understand your future goals. Again, where do you see the company growing? What are your growth areas? Are you changing your customer focus? Are you looking into new selling models or new channels? We'd want to take that into account as we both migrate and rebuild and enhance from what CPQ is doing for you now to what RCA can do for you in the future. And then again, we'd keep in mind these interdependencies. If you are using any third-party tools, if you have any integrations, both upstream and downstream in terms of where you're mastering data or where your finance system is, et cetera, we'd keep that in mind. So again, we can optimize how RCA is going to connect, which offers more flexibility with how those connections and interfaces can occur and what data can be generated and passed compared to CPQ. So we can often, reduce technical debt and do some remediation as part of a migration. And we'd want to understand your overall desire in terms of what you want to do on the platform. We want to examine and help you examine what a potential program is for growth on the Salesforce platform, with RCA being one core portion of it. But then obviously, based on what other tools and modules and clouds you might want to utilize on Salesforce, we would plan for that, even if it doesn't happen as part of a migration effort. And then won't go through all the details with the best practice implementation, but with all of that foundation and understanding your future goals, we would then help to phase out and split out what is going to get you the best time to value for getting up and running on the revamped system on RCA, and how you might approach future phases for additional work there as well. And in general, the approach we always take, and what we would say is the best practice approach in general, is expecting complexities. So again, digging into the technical debt and always asking why. Why are we doing things this way currently? Why do we have this customization? Why was it built originally? Why are we not using this certain functionality of CPQ? Would we want to actually use the RCA version of that functionality? So we always want to dig in and make sure we understand everything, even if at the surface your process is currently simplified. We always look to lead with configuration and the point and click configuration as opposed to coding and customization. But we keep customization in our back pocket. It's an aspect of the platform that can help with extensibility, and there's a time and a place for it. But we want to keep maintenance in mind and your future state in mind as well. And then we like having perfect doesn't prevent good, or perfect is the enemy of good. Many sayings around that point, but we would want to focus on an MVP approach, again, to get you that time to value, and then help to phase out a program if you have a lot of complexity that needs to be built, or a lot of future goals for what you'd want built on the Salesforce system. And we do it all with a smile, to that last point, embracing the challenge. Okay, on to what Prodly can offer. I'll hand it over to Matt.
All right. Yeah. So thanks, Alex. Appreciate the partnership and the opportunity to talk about our migration tool in the context of CPQ to RCA migration. So just to set the background a little bit, as I said, I have quite a bit of experience in the space in general, and particularly in one end of this migration. That's why we've been working closely with the Salesforce product team for the past, a year now, maybe more, to develop this tool to help streamline the migration from CPQ to RCA. To be sort of perfectly frank and upfront, right? Like, this is, the right way to think about this is an accelerator, right? There's no such thing as one-click migration. There's no fully automated migration. It just doesn't exist. The products are two different. And so in that context, we like to think about migration as kind of falling in one of these three buckets, right? So there are some things in CPQ that can be fully and automatically migrated. Right, and that's the automated migration category. The second level beyond that is, or below that, I guess I should say, is like this assisted, what we call the assisted category, where some automation is possible, but manual intervention is required either before and or after the migration. And then the last bit is, manual, or really sort of like rework. And, this is the case where a particular functionality does not yet exist in RCA, or it's so different that it requires, essentially re-implementation. So with that framework in mind, let's talk about the process. So next slide, please. So this is our migration process. I mean, this hopefully makes a lot of sense. The first step is, analysis. Our migration application will actually run through your CPQ config and flag potential issues with configuration data in the context of migration. So, like, one example of that is, in CPQ, the data model is such that product options in the bundle, can be orphaned. Right, like the lookup to the product was not master detail, so you could end up with orphan product options. In RCA, that is not permitted, so those records will not be successfully migrated. Probably not a big deal, because you're not, if an option is orphaned, you're obviously not using it anyway, right? That's more like that would on your CPQ implementation, but in any case, we'll flag these things for you, and so you can clean it up. Of course, there's other areas where, that are more consequential. So, for example, if you have, the discount schedules that are marked as cross-order, cross-product, there's no checkbox in RCA. So that does require a manual config with pricing procedures to make that use case work. So we'll also flag that for you, right? And the point is that, you'll be going into the migration with eyes wide open. You'll know what you got and what will migrate, what won't, and where you have to bring resources like Thunder to help you, rethink things and re-architect them around the new product. So then there's the 4 migration steps. Obviously, the foundation of it all is a product catalog, and I'm going to talk about each of these in detail in the next slides. But the process is product catalog, right? You got to get that first. Got to get the SKUs in, the bundles, whatnot. Next step is pricing. Step 4 is transactions. By transactions, we refer to orders and quotes. And step 5 is the install base. So this is contract subscriptions, assets, and CPQ that need to be migrated to an asset, a managed asset in RCA. So there's some nuance to even the assets needs to be migrated, even though it's the same object. So that's the framework, and of course, the last but not least is quality assurance, right? Making sure things work. And this process you would do obviously in a sandbox using the Prodly provided tooling to migrate CPQ to RCA, get RCA stood up, and then you will use Prodly to actually deploy all of that config, the RCA config from sandbox to up your pipeline, right, to UAT, and then ultimately to production. So this is not to be done in production, obviously. All right, next slide, please. All right, so I'll go through these quickly. So these are like screenshots of this tool that we make available to our customers and clients of our partners. It's a managed package that you install, and it's basically like a wizard that walks you through that process. And so what you're looking at is a screenshot of this analysis step where we'll flag things like like orphan product options that I mentioned as an example. Next slide, please. So let's talk about product catalog. So there's kind of like 3, well, I guess 4 kind of major areas that we identified. So there's options and features, so the bundles, if you will. That actually translates pretty well, right? Like I would put this in the automated category because we can take the CPQ bundles and convert them into RCA bundles. Obviously it's the lowest common denominator migration, just because we can't convert it doesn't mean you shouldn't take a look at your product catalog design to take advantage of the new capabilities in RCA to manage product catalogs at scale. But it can be automated. And configuration attributes as well. So there's some really interesting nuances there. In CPQ, configuration attributes are sort of split between metadata and data. So there's a metadata component to it, which is the field that defines the type and pick list values if it's a pick list field. And then there's a record in an object configuration attribute, right? That you use to assign these attributes to bundles. In RCA, everything is in data model. So in this case, there's movement from metadata to data, and so we will actually go and extract the metadata and convert everything to the data records that RCA expects. So that also works pretty well. Again, doesn't mean you shouldn't look at your config attribute setup to take advantage of RCA functionality. You should. Configure rules are a little bit more difficult. So there's some gaps in sort of what RCA supports with configure rules right now vis-a-vis CPQ. So we will convert what's supported and what's not supported. We obviously can't. But there's sort of, from what I understand, there's a shift from configure rules in CPQ to Configurator Advanced, which is the new constraint-based configurator. And so we'll be, that's, I think, supposed to ship in GA next release, I believe. So we're already working to kind of take a look at that and see if there's anything we can do to convert CPQ product rules into RCA Advanced Configurator config. And then dynamic bundles, so it's a bit of an obscure feature in CPQ. It doesn't exist in RCA, so you'll have to come up with some other ways to handle those requirements. All right. So pricing, pricing is probably the toughest of them all, to be honest with you. Just pricing is so different in RCA than it is in CPQ. There's no such thing as price rules. A lot of the pricing constructs that are, a field change or in CPQ are, require some config in RCA with pricing procedures and, decision tables and whatnot. But basically the way to think about it is, everything is sort of like a lookup table, lookup pricing in RCA. So you'll have to reimagine pricing with that in mind. What we can migrate for you are the discount schedules, right? So, and we'll take those and convert them to the price adjustment schedules, as they're called in RCA. So that we can do for you, but the rest requires reconfig in RCA. Next slide, please. So transactions is also a bit spotty. So let's talk about them separately. So orders, obviously there's don't actually need to be migrated because it's the same object that CPQ uses and RCA uses. Quotes are different though. CPQ, as you are well aware, uses a custom quote object. Because we built it before there was a standard quote object in Salesforce. RCA is built on top of the standard quote object. What we can do is we will migrate CPQ quotes to RCA quotes, but really just the quote structure, right? Well, we'll add the same products and like build the scaffolding of the quote, if you will. What will not be migrated is the actual pricing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, a lot of the pricing waterfall in RCA is actually stored in child objects that sit underneath the quote line. And those are read-only. So you can migrate data into it. But even if it was possible to migrate data into it, because the pricing engine is so different, right? It's next to impossible to get to the correct price in CPQ, to get to the same price in CPQ with the CPQ pricing construct, to back into the price in RCA. So what we recommend basically is, leave the past transactions alone. I mean, that's for sure, right? So just keep them as they are in CPQ, and you can add another related list or keep that related quotes list on the opportunity for those. And then focus on migrating the in-flight quotes, right? And again, we will take those, we will convert them into RCA quotes and save the reps from adding the products, but then they'll have to go and recalculate pricing on them using the RCA pricing engine. Of course, that can be done manually, or it could be done, programmatically using the pricing API. But that's the approach that we recommend. Next slide, please. So now we're into install base. So I think, frankly, of everything, this is probably where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, the most mileage out of migration. We built technology to actually convert CPQ contracts and subscriptions into managed assets in RCA. RCA has a different architecture for the install base. So for those of you familiar with CPQ, you obviously know that CPQ splits recurring subscription products from non-subscription products. The subscription products go into a subscription object, custom object in CPQ. One-time products go into assets. In RCA, everything is an asset. And there's a number of kind of child objects underneath that capture the changes to the asset over time. And but one interesting point I want to make, so even though like even the assets, even the perpetual products, right, even though they're both CPQ and RCA store them as assets, they're not the same. So you can't just take a CPQ asset and use it in RCA. It has to be what's called a managed asset, or life cycle managed asset. I forget what the term that they use. So we will actually, so there's some migration even from like asset to asset that's required to make it show up in RCA, and our tool will do that for you. All right, and do you want to? There's some questions. Do we want to answer them now, Alex, or later? I guess later, probably, yeah.
Sorry, I think, yeah, let's answer a couple of them now. I think one of them is specific to about Prodly, I think it's more just from a general DevOps perspective than a migration perspective, but is Prodly able to handle the new CLM language that RCA uses? I had heard this as a concern previously.
Um, so the current version of the migrate, we're not migrating the contracts or the code docs yet. So that's yet to come. So I'm not terribly familiar with. I mean, I know there's new CLM functionality in RCA, and there really isn't much in CPQ. Like there's quote terms and things like that. So I mean, my gut is like that's probably not going to be a particularly fruitful area to focus on, just because CPQ is storing quote templates as basically a markup language, and RCA is using a word-based templates, and so that sort of feels like the long tail of migration. We're focused on the areas where we feel are you're going to get the most mileage, the most bang for your buck on, like the install base, like product catalog migration, right? As we tackle those, we can start to look at this like long tail of use cases. So definitely something we'll add to the list to review. But personally, I don't think you're probably just better off rebuilding them. It'd probably be easier than trying to migrate them. Like the
And
signal to noise ratio is going to be pretty low, I bet.
yeah, and that is from our perspective, from an implementation perspective, it is more of a rebuild, or we pause and transition from what you were using previously into the go forward, right? The net new would be using Salesforce contracts. I mean, we understand if you might want to migrate data, especially if you're spinning up a new org, you have a lot of complexity, then we could migrate some of those actual contract documents and files. But I do think that's potentially an edge case, but certainly something we could help with. Another question, I think, for you, Max, is I'm curious to understand the intended approach for using Prodly automation. Is it primarily for lift and shift style, or does the tool itself incorporate and guide users towards best practice? And if you talk more about that.
Yeah, so it's the former. We're the tool, right? Like to maybe give you guys an analogy, right? Like we're here in California, at least I am, or in San Francisco. So in the gold rush, like there's people who go and mine the gold, and there's people who provide the shovels and the jeans, like Levi's, right? So we're we're providing the shovels for the Thunders of the world to go work with you guys to execute this migration. And the reason is, as we've been alluding to, right? It is, yes, it's on platform. Yes, it's a product from Salesforce, but it is a different product, right? So some things map and map pretty well, and other things don't. And you also made a really important point, like you asked, is it a lift and shift? So, I mean, by definition, like the migration that we're doing is, I mean, certainly for product catalog, right? It is lift and shift, right? We will take your bundles as they are in CPQ, and we will convert them to RCA bundles. And and maybe that's fine for like phase one, but ultimately, you should probably refactor your product catalog to take advantage of features like product classifications in RCA, right? That basically allow you to have templates for products, and which ultimately allows you to manage a large product catalog at scale. So yeah, I mean, it's really an accelerator, it's an enabling technology, it's a shovel for these guys to go work with and execute on migration as quickly as possible. But it's not going to go and redesign your product catalog automatically, right, to take advantage of RCA.
And I think that question also ties into this next slide here, and sort of the joint approach, and why Salesforce recommends using a tool like Prodly, but then also finding a partner with the expertise to help you with that migration, because there is always going to be that analysis. There are some things like Max talked about that just won't be able to be migrated, and there's another question around cost plus markup pricing. Can we migrate to the same pricing procedure in Revenue Cloud? And the answer is no, not really. Because I mean, the pricing procedure would be net new in Revenue Cloud, and we would need to replicate as best as possible the logic that the Salesforce CPQ, the CPQ engine used. So that is an area where we as a partner would come in and help with that analysis to understand exactly how you're using cost plus markup, how you want to use it in the future, if there's any thing that wasn't meeting your expectations with the old CPQ, and then implement that in a new pricing procedure with RCA. So there is that. We work hand in hand basically with the tool itself, which is it's an accelerator, as Max mentioned, in order to make the process goes more smoothly and with less prone to human error because there's as much automated mapping as possible. But then also with our expertise in order to help with the analysis, the planning, etc. I know there's one other question. I will get to it, but I want to get.
Well, and that said, by the way, I just want to kind of chime in. So so Alex is correct. Right now, yes, we don't touch pricing procedures. We don't generate configured pricing procedures. Theoretically, is that possible? Maybe, but that's kind of like that long tail of migrations that I'm talking about. So we're sort of focusing on the most useful parts of the migration first, and then as we kind of work through this, now that we work through those, we can kind of turn our attention to the long tail use cases, and obviously we're working very closely with partners to get their feedback on what else can we help automate that would make the most impact, that makes the most sense, right? And so just because you can do it, technically it doesn't mean that you should do it, right? It's the signal to noise ratio that I'm referring to. In fact, we did sort of think about, hey, like, can we take price rolls and like try to like generate flows or something, like somehow try to shoehorn it into the new pricing framework of RCA. And the feedback we got from partners, like, no, don't do it, right? Because like, you're actually creating more work for me. I'm gonna have to go and then delete them all, right? Because we want to start fresh. It's a different pricing approach, and it just don't do it. So not saying that's the case here necessarily, but we're sort of starting with things like install base, where like clearly you're going to need to migrate subscription data, right, from CPQ to RCA, and you don't want to do that manually.
And I think that's the key. We're always looking for that optimal, right? We want to maximize both what can be done via tools and also what can be done or what requires analysis, and find the best path forward. We want our focus is that time to value again. So that's what we're gonna take, whatever approach is going to work for the situation. I will say to that cost plus markup approach before, the data itself, right? Cost data obviously probably can be used to migrate that if necessary into a new lookup object, for example.
Absolutely.
Lookup table. So I mean, there's always a middle ground that we can find. So this does lead to, so what is our approach? How quickly, can this be done? When we look at things realistically for the majority of our customers, the timeline is probably around 10 weeks. Now, this is not saying it can't be done shorter if you have a very sort of minimal CPQ implementation, or using mostly out of the box, but because that's where more tooling more of Prodly's functionality can accelerate even more. But as you layer in complexity when it comes to pricing, when it comes to some of the other areas we talked about, then that can expand the timeline, because now we have to do that analysis, that redesign, and then implement directly in RCA. But we do have a methodology, a project methodology that I won't get into here, but we'd be happy to talk about with anyone who is interested in looking out and getting an estimate for a CPQ to RCA migration. We're happy to dig in with you and get you more details. But we as part of any of our migration efforts, we would definitely use Prodly. We use Prodly for all of our formerly CPQ and now RCA projects. And so that would be something that would be included as part of our quick start here. And then for long-term maintenance for you and for your ongoing sort of business as usual, whether with CPQ or with RCA in the future, of course, obviously you can work with Prodly directly in order to improve your DevOps process. All right, so I know we have a few other questions that I definitely wanted to get to here, and if any others come up, please do ask in the Q&A. Do we have any customers live on RCA or currently implementing, and can we share any lessons learned from those implementations? None live yet. We have a couple in progress that we are implementing right now. And interestingly enough, the biggest lessons learned are the same lessons that we needed to learn years ago with CPQ projects. It's not the technology necessarily that is causing new lessons. It's that the same lessons always apply. And what are those? It's understanding the complexity, which we talked about in a previous slide. So fully defining what we want to do with the tool, because we see this, we've seen this over and over with clients over the years, that let's take the example of cost plus market pricing. We want cost plus market pricing. Okay, simple enough, whether it's CPQ or RCA. Do you have the data? Do you have your cost data? Where is that being mastered? Digging into all those details. Are there different circumstances, where different markups would apply, whether regional or for certain accounts, et cetera? All those details, when we dig in and pull threads, we find a lot of our customers don't have that defined, or maybe it's institutional knowledge, or maybe there's new use cases that are coming into play, a certain business segment that the company's getting into. So I think understanding all that complexity and having a dedicated, which we do for all of our projects, discovery and design phase, where we can dig in, make sure we fully understand, and then properly design an optimized solution on the platform with RCA, as well as a path forward in terms of phasing, in terms of user stories, even in terms of how we phase out those sprints even within the project. It's down to those basics that are still the ongoing lessons learned, and RCA is really no different. And then another question just came up. Since there's not true feature parity between RCA and CPQ, partners like Thunder are critical to migrate. I would say yes. I'm biased here. I'll let Max chime in as well. But I think it's not about feature parity necessarily. It's about how those features work. So the underlying architecture of CPQ versus RCA. CPQ as a managed package has a lot of features and functionality. Again, many tens of thousands of customers around the world have been using it, but it built in a way that had limitations just by necessity in order to make it easier to implement and easier to maintain. And RCA is built from the ground up to be more scalable, to be headless, et cetera. And so the architecture is different. It's that inevitable trade-off between, is it easy to implement and maintain versus how much flexibility, power, performance does it offer? And that can lead to different architectural decisions. And so that's where some of the things require analysis and re-implementation where partners can help. And it's not something that can easily be automated. But Max, I don't know if you have other thoughts there as well. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah. I think that's the right way to think about it. It's not so, let's say a year ago, there was definitely kind of lack of feature parity, but the team has been innovating quickly, and every release they're closing gaps, and I don't think there's any major gaps left right now. So it is more about like how these things work, right? And I do think it's an important sort of point that Alex raised, right? It like with all these things, right? With everything in life, it's about trade-offs, right? And Steelbrick sort of erred on the side of easy, like faster time to market, faster time to value, ease of implementation. And, that necessarily led to trade-offs in terms of like flexibility, and the flexibility of the data model and the flexibility of configuration, and it wasn't designed with it, to be headless, API first, which, RCA is. So, there's a lot of advantages to the new architecture, right? But, and it's more powerful, it's more flexible, but, the downside is, yeah, it takes a little bit more effort to configure certain things than it did in CPQ. And so, it's a question of sort of, like Alex said, right, really kind of working from requirements and the process automation that you want to have in place, and mapping that to the new product and figuring out how to use it to its full potential.
Yep. And just I do see the final question there about cost plus, not out of the box versus capability or feature parity. I get what you're saying to the questioner that cost plus markup is not as direct or easy a configuration as it was in CPQ, but we've implemented it. It's certainly doable in RCA. There's just more that goes into the configuration under the hood in order to get there. But again, it's because of that flexibility and fitting. Okay, because we're building our own price waterfall. That's the flexibility that RCA offers. Is you build your own price waterfall every time, as opposed to having a predefined price waterfall. So yeah, it's trade-offs, but hopefully that does help here. I know we're out of time. We will, I think, have some documents that will be going out to the attendees. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Thank you, especially Max, for your time today, for joining and sharing the information you did about Prodly and what it can do here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Delighted to be here. And anyone in the audience, if you have any questions, you know where to find me. I'm on LinkedIn at Rudman, and obviously Prodly.co is the website.